Hello. As I promised in the last episode, this one we're now going to be talking about houses. And it's the part of astrology that people get the most screwed up. I think is the word is good. People find it the most complicated part of astrology. And it really doesn't have to be, provided you understand the main point, which is there's no point in talking about houses if you haven't got an accurate birth chart time. So time of birth. Now the reason for this is when you construct a birth chart, it is, as we've discussed before, a map of the Earth spinning in space. And if you imagine the centre of the chart is the Earth in space, everything around that centre part of the chart is where the planets were in the various different signs on the date of birth. Now, because we on the Earth is spinning and we are orbiting around the Sun, when we're on Earth looking up at the sky, as the day progresses, the Sun moves across the sky. It rises in the east and sets in the west, and it's that circuit of the Sun that determines where your sun, like your sun sign, is going to be in your chart. So always remember when you make a chart up, if you're born during the day, and we're imagining that a birth chart is a representation of our Earth spinning in space, that if you were born during the day, your sun, so the sun is who you are, the sign of the zodiac you are, should be above the horizon if you were born during daylight. If you're born at night time, the sun will be below the horizon. So as you look at your birth chart, divide the whole thing in half from left to right. Sun above, daytime. Sun below, nighttime. So that's a useful thing to remember. Now, in sticking your sun sign in either of those positions, either above or below, and having that line going through the centre, as we've discussed before, the left-hand section of it that's called the ascendant, that's determined by your time of birth. So let's say, for instance, you were born 7 o'clock in the morning, your sun sign and your ascendant, or in fact, 6 o'clock in the morning, your sun sign and your ascendant are going to be reasonably similar in sign. Yeah? Now, to make this easier to understand, we're first of all going to be using the chart of Queen Elizabeth I. So if you go over to Astro Databank, Google it, you'll find it, and put in Queen Elizabeth. We've discussed before Queen Elizabeth II, but this time we're going to discuss Queen Elizabeth I. Bless. And she was born... where have we got? I've disappeared. Where's she gone now? Come back. I've saved that. We go to Astro Databank. Briefly lost her. Let's go back to Astro Databank. You just stick in Queen Elizabeth, and Queen Elizabeth the First will come up in the search box. So you put the search box in Astro Databank at the top right hand corner. Queen Elizabeth the First is the third chart that's in the list. And when you get to her page, if you click on natal chart equal houses, I'll explain what an equal house is in a minute. Hold on. So her chart starts in the sign of Capricorn because she was born at 2:54 in the afternoon. So we know for a fact that in the afternoon, if you're born in the UK, the sun is going to be somewhere up in the sky. It's not going to be on the horizon. It's not going to be coming down. That's just after lunch, basically, because 12 o'clock it's going to be in its highest position, depending on what time of year. And she was born a little bit earlier to the afternoon, 2:54. So in her chart, her sun is in a high position. Now, because her sun sign is Virgo, and we're dividing all of the chart into the 12 equal signs, we're dividing the universe up into the 12 signs of the zodiac, the sign that she was born, what's called the ascendant or the rising sign, is going to be different to her sun sign because she was born in the afternoon. And now one of my chart examples today, let me double check, she was born reasonably early in the morning, and her sun sign and ascendant the next sign on. Where's my lady here? Yes, one of my chart example ladies, she's called Jo because she was born at 7:30 in the morning. She's a Sagittarius. Her ascendant is also Sagittarius. Okay. So your ascending sign, where your chart starts, because we're calling the ascendant the beginning part of your chart ascending, it's rising, it's the rising sign, because that's determined by your time of birth. Then that's the starting point to the construction of your chart. And we've divided the universe up into 12 equal segments. When we've determined your time of birth, we then divide the chart up again into another 12 equal segments, and each one of those segments is what we call a house. Now, the reason they're called houses is because back in the day, I think they called them mansions, because it's the seat of where your planets are. Where are they at home? So if you think of a house as a home for each planet that might or might not be in there. Now let's do some maths here. We've got 12 houses and 10 planets. So just on the maths front, not every one of your houses is going to have a planet in it. Some of them might be empty, and depending on your chart shape, which we discussed in episode 1, if you've got a very clustered chart, you're going to have an awful lot of your planets in adjacent houses or very near to each other, and then you're going to have a whole segment of your chart that's going to be empty. But all we're discussing today is just the concept of houses. In the next episode, we are going to talk about what each house means. But for the moment, I just want you to grasp the idea of what a house is. Now, these aren't real. They don't exist. I mean, they don't exist. They truly don't exist. They're not a real thing. I can't say we've got proof of what houses are because I can't. It's just the maths. The original astrologers, when they were messing about, they decided to. I mean, we know we've got 12 signs of the zodiac, but you know, when you think about a circle, it's 360 degrees. What are you going to divide it up by? You could divide it by 10, but we've divided it by 12, and each one of those houses is going to be 30 degrees to make up our 360 degrees. And each one of those houses, they go around anti-clockwise in your chart. Each one of those represents a different area of life. Now, just the same as when we say in palmistry that the segment that's underneath your thumb is called, what are we thinking now? As Venus. That's the Venus part of your hand. And the centre of your hand is the Mars part of your hand. So we're just denoting and differentiating between each segment in your chart. I say just the same as we do in palmistry. There's different segments of your hand, different lines even, that represent different things, but they're not real, as in the sense they're not real, they're just a representation. But it's amazing when you get into astrology, when you have studied astrology for a long time, the location of someone's sun sign, so that where their sun ends up in their chart, it really is indicative of how they are as a person and how they operate. Now, Queen Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth I of England, if you look at her chart using the equal house system, which I'll explain in just a second, her sun sign is in the 9th segment. So her sun sign she was a sun Virgo, is in number 9, and number 9 in astrology, the 9th house, is about long distance travel, further education, philosophy, spirituality, religion, that type of thing. And if you do a little bit of history on Queen Elizabeth, she was pretty much happy to be a leader of a religious organisation, you know, the Christian Church of England, and she had quite a few beliefs and stuff, but she was very much a Virgo, so she didn't rush into things. She did take her time, and her ascendant is Capricorn, exactly the same ascendant, interestingly enough, as Queen Elizabeth II, our present queen, except the sun signs are different. But not everything is different, because Queen Elizabeth I is sun sign Virgo, Capricorn ascendant, and her moon is in Taurus, so it's almost as if their charts are reversed, because Queen Elizabeth II is sun sign Taurus, Capricorn ascendant, but moon in Leo. So there's some similarities and some differences there, but you can see that they are flipping well related in some way. And just keep this in mind, whatever you've got in your 5th house, And next week we will talk about what the house meanings are. The 5th house is to do with romance, art, creativity, but it's similar to, but not the same as, the 5th sign of the zodiac, which is Leo, and that's all things royalty related. And Queen Elizabeth I has her moon, the emotional self, in the 5th house. Now, she never actually gave birth. Did she give birth? I don't think she did. I don't think Queen Elizabeth I had kiddies, did she? I'm sure she didn't. I'm sure she didn't have children. But anyway, she could have. It wasn't as if she wasn't fertile. If anybody said she wasn't, maybe she never had sex with anybody. I don't know. But I don't believe. Let me just double. I haven't said that. I don't even know if she did. She didn't. Hold on. Queen Elizabeth I. Did she have children? Did she? I'm sure she didn't. Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth I. Did she have children? Died, born, burial. I'm sure she didn't. Death, legacy, ancestry, marriage. I don't think. I'm sure she didn't. I don't think she had. I mean, don't ask me who came on the throne after, but she didn't. But if I was looking at her chart today, and Queen Elizabeth, the first to come to me as a client, and she said, "Do you think I will have children?" I go, "Well, actually, madam, you're perfectly capable of having them, because moon in the 5th house, the moon is a fertile planet, and the 5th house is to do with having babies and stuff." So I would reassure them. I go, "Yes, Queenie, it's perfectly possible for you to have children. You just have to find the right chap." Now, there are all different house systems. I'm not going to get into why they are or they aren't, or they do or they don't. The systems of house division, obviously different blokes have decided which way to do it. And there was a chap called Placidus. I don't even know what his first name was, but his second name is Placidus. And he developed a system of house division. So this is how you divide the chart up into segments, and his system, which near enough every flipping website and everybody uses, means that when you look at a chart, each one of those segments, each one of those houses is a different size, and I just cannot get on with it. It totally does my head in. Quite a lot of people use it. It's like, it just gives me brain ache. So I use an older version of house system division, and that's called equal house. And that's what the original astrologers back in the day, the Babylonians, blah, 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 they used equal house. So it was Mr. Placidus, whenever he came along, I think it was 1100 and something, he developed the system. Mr. Placidus did the Placidus system, and I absolutely hate it. But the equal house system is exactly that. Each one of your houses is going to be exactly the same mathematical size of 30 degrees big. So when you look at your chart, the houses themselves look nice and even. Now, if you just whiz over to any website, stick your details in, you'll get your chart made up, and you'll look at those houses, and they might or might not be numbered, but they will be all different sizes. And I definitely don't recommend it when you're learning astrology. And in fact, I learnt with the equal house system, and I've never wanted to go away from it. It just works fine for me. Keeping in mind that the different house systems mean different planets will end up in different houses. Yeah. So it might be that if I use the Placidus system for Queen Elizabeth I, and I'm saying her sun sign falls in the 9th house, and the Placidus system, who knows, it might be in the 8th house. And that's where astrologers differ amongst themselves. This is why I'm saying it's not a real thing. It's just a representation. And don't get too screwed up about it. Just practice first with the equal house system. If you go on to Placidus later on and you enjoy it, and you read the interpretation for sun in the da-da-da house, and that suits you better, then by all means go for it. But when you're learning, stick with equal house, because it means that you can see chart shapes better, and also it's easier on the eye to look at. So your houses start at the ascendant point. So where your ascendant is, that first segment is going to go in from whatever sign it is. Now, one of the ladies whose charts I'm going to be talking about in a minute, her name's Kay. When she was reading, she's fantastic. She's done the edit of my next book, The Astrology of Lovers. She found it a bit difficult to understand why, when she was looking at the chart examples in my book, when she made her chart up, her chart started in a different sign. And this is just down to timing, because every 2 hours that ascendant sign is going to change. So unless you were born exactly the same date and time and location as someone else, and if you're born 2 hours different, your ascendant sign is going to be different. And so the first house is always the ascendant sign. So if your ascendant is Capricorn, then your first house is going to start in the sign of Capricorn. However, depending on what time you were born, using the equal house system, and in Queen Elizabeth I's case, not all of her first house is in the sign of Capricorn, because when you look at her chart you'll see, oh yeah, it starts in Capricorn but it ends in the sign of Aquarius, and her second house starts in the sign of Aquarius and ends in the sign of Pisces. So just keep that in mind, that your houses, which is the inner circle of your chart, might not exactly correspond to the signs of the zodiac going around the outside. I hope you're with me on that one. And that's down to timing, because what we can't do is change the way we've divided the universe up. So we divided the universe up originally because it related to the stars that were behind, the star systems that were behind the segments of the sky. Now it's always what it was to start with anyway. We start the division of the zodiac at this spring solstice, which is the 0 point of Aries, and then everything corresponds on from that. We can't change those divisions because they're worked out by orbits and stuff. But your houses, they're not going to correspond exactly to that unless you were born bang on the side at the time of when your first house corresponds to whatever sign of the zodiac that is. So again, that's a timing thing. So your individual houses might contain 2 signs of the zodiac. Don't stress about it. We'll come back to it when we do a bit more about houses, because this is 2 or 3 episodes are going to have to take this, because it's a lot to take in. So all you need to remember to start with is that your houses and how they're divided are determined by your time of birth, and if you haven't got a time of birth, then we can't talk houses. We can talk signs of the zodiac. We can say, oh yes, you're a Leo and you've got moon in Virgo and all of that, and Mercury and this, and Venus and Mars and that. What we can't do is talk about houses, because you can only make an accurate chart by having an accurate time of birth, and that's why it's always a good idea to use members of the royal family if you're starting with astrology. Shall I tell you why? Because every royal birth, and that is every royal birth, they note the time. Now when you and me are born, and we're born in the UK, no one pays any attention to the time of birth. Sometimes the staff will write it on your notes in the hospital, but it doesn't correspond to your birth certificate. But if you're a member of the royal family, it's imperative that they have your time of birth, because somebody might pick you to the post, there might be a twin, one might be older than the other, blah blah blah. So it's all down to ancestry and stuff. And UK born babies don't have their birth time on their birth certificates. If you're born in Scotland, hurrah, you will. If you're born all over Europe, yes. If you're born in America, yes. UK, no. Your time of birth will not be on your birth certificate unless you're the royal family. So I really suggest when you start doing astrology, check out a few members of royalty when you're making their charts. So they're all on Astro Databank. So houses are going to be equally sized, going around anti-clockwise from the starting point of your ascendant, because that is your time of birth. So in Queen Elizabeth I's time, when she was born, which was 2:54 in the afternoon, if Mum had looked out of the window to the eastern side of the earth, the sign of the zodiac that was rising at 2:54 in the afternoon was Capricorn. So her chart starts in the sign of Capricorn, rises in the east, sets in the west. So your rising sign it's the sign of the zodiac that's on the horizon at your time of birth. It might not be where the planets are, it might not be where the sun is, but it's the sign that was rising. Yeah, and that's going to change every 2 hours. So every 2 hours, that ascendant sign, that sign that's on the horizon, is going to shift because we're spinning in space. Yeah, we're moving, we're not static. In fact, nothing is static. There's no such thing as static. When you get into life a little bit more, you realize nothing is static. Everything moves, and your chart moves. Your birth chart stays the same, but the planets are moving all the time. Okay. Now, any questions, do get in touch, mary@maryenglish.co.uk. It's a bit more of a tricky one this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's a little bit about houses. Next episode, we're going to talk about meanings of houses. And we'll be using the three ladies whose charts, 3 ladies that have volunteered. So it's Jo, Galina and Kay have volunteered their charts, and then the next episode. So thanks very much. And if you need to get in touch, it's mary@maryenglish.co.uk. I have written a book for each sign of the zodiac. They're all available on Amazon. I've also written a lovely book called 6 Easy Steps in Astrology that is what we're talking about here. And I teach astrology 1-to-1. It's £25 a lesson, and it takes 6 weeks, and you get a free copy of the book 6 Easy Steps when you finish. So I hope you have a fab week. Bye bye now.